Hey guys, what's up? This is Stock Retail coming back to you. Happy Wednesday, happy AMC earnings day. I think it's going to be a really great day. Very excited for all that we're going to see today and very excited for how the box office is going. As you can see, and I am very serious about this is not clickbait, is AMC about to set an all-time record? So I'm going to talk to you about that. I'm going to back that up with some facts and DD as I always do. So I was just very, very excited to talk to you about that because if you go back a few videos, look for a Q1 earnings kind of, I don't know, preview, I think it was 2 or 3 videos ago here on this YouTube channel. You'll see I was kind of sharing that obviously Q1 at the box office was a little light. That was known for a long time. You can just tell by the movies that were coming out what the forecasts were and all that. So I've been kind of alerting everybody to that. And of course, we know short and distort, there'll be some manipulators who try to highlight basically results we have from 4 months ago, right? January is in there, February from 3 months ago, and March from 2 months ago. So those results are in the rear view, but here we are doing very, very well in Q2, and I'm completely serious. I think we may be about to set an all-time record I want to talk to you about. So I think it's just worth, as we go into an earnings call to talk about Q1, that we know where we are now and where we're going. Speaking of where we're going, this morning, Disney had an earnings call. If you didn't catch that, you can go find that all over the interwebs. Um, and so Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, was saying he is so bullish on the movie slate that he thinks it's the best Disney movie slate for the next 18 months. So not even just for a couple months, but for the next 18 months, he's looking out and saying, man, we've got the best movie slate we've had since 2019. Well, to understand the gravity of that statement, it would be worth knowing a few movies in 2019 from Disney. Now, here's just 3 of them. So we had The Lion King live action, which you can see here did $1.6 billion globally. That was in 2019 for Disney. Disney that year also had Avengers Endgame, which of course just, pretty much the biggest movie of all time, $2.8 billion globally, and had The Rise of Skywalker, which was over $1 billion globally. That's just a selection of a few movies. You could go back and look, but the point is, as I've been saying for a long time, if we got to April, we had done the Survive piece, which we're going to talk about. I mean, Q1 earnings is basically part of the Survive era, right? We're going to look back at that. And in a way, I think it can kind of be a celebration of closing a chapter of our lives. And, that's a good thing. Sometimes you pause and acknowledge a time in your life, and then you say, okay, now we're moving on to the next. And so I'm seriously looking forward to today's earnings as sort of a moment where we get to move into our next chapter. And that next chapter, we're already in. As you know, in April, we doubled last year's April, and I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But so some things from Disney this year, right? And why would Bob Iger say this? Well, of course, we've got Thunderbolts just came out. We've got Lilo and Stitch is about to come out. We got Avatar later this year. Elio is still this quarter, and there's a few other things throughout the year from Disney. So it's just a really, really big year. And that's just 2025, but he's saying 18 months. That takes you to the end of 2026 even, which I've told you 2026 starts to look even bigger for us. You get like Mando and Avengers and just a lot of things starts to really crank, not just for Disney, but obviously Disney being one of the biggest studios for the whole box office. We start to really, really do well. So speaking of how we've been doing, like I said, this Q1 earnings call is going to look in the rear view. It's going to look back at January, February, March. We're going to have some history. We're looking at some hindsighting, which Q1 was just not so great. We don't have to sort of sugarcoat that. We can acknowledge that. But because of that, it's just worth knowing where we are and where we're going, right? So far in Q2, we have been basically doubling last year. I have said throughout the month of May, we're going to keep kind of tracking well ahead of last year. In June last year, we started to get some pretty big movies. I think around that time, you're starting to look at like Twisters and Deadpool and Inside Out. I'd have to go back and look at the exact dates for all of that. So we won't continue to stay fully double last year. But for April and May, and if you think about cash flows being real time, that's why I've told you guys about that. When Adam has to share the Q1 cash flow, the Q1 cash burn, that's in the past. We've already been there, done that. That was the Survive piece, and we did survive. Now we're in Thrive. Cash flows from April and now May have been coming in, and so far we've doubled up last year. That's nice growth. That's really big growth. And what we don't even have yet so far, you haven't even seen numbers from Final Destination Bloodlines, Mission Impossible, Lilo and Stitch, Karate Kid, Ballerina, Elio, How to Train Your Dragon live action, 28 years later, Megan 2, F1. And there's actually a bunch of movies I'm not even listing, plus the legs from all the movies we've got. So you already know Q2 is going to be amazing. But let's start talking about that all time record. I want to show you another metric that I haven't really shown before. I don't actually track this very often because it's not the way that I forecast. I forecast a lot of details, but it's just this would kind of be a nice high level number to help ground you in why I think we might hit an all time record. It's going to make sense. So if you think about AMC's global revenue for every $1 million of domestic box office we have, I'm showing you a 3-year view here. Here's all of 2022 and 23 and 24. And I just went back and took a look. And so for every $1 million at the box office, let's take the Q4 we just finished. So I'm going to highlight that. So every $1 million we got at the US and Canada box office, the domestic box office, AMC made basically 56 cents globally, 0.559. And so if you think about all of our food and beverage sales, all of our merch sales, all of our attendance, not just in the US, but then globally, so over in Europe in particular, the popcorn sales, AMC's revenue, you could just say, okay, for every $1 million of the domestic box office, I could have some multiplier and I could guess at what AMC's revenue is going to be. And so this is our history. You remember last year, Q3, I was a bit disappointed with our attendance. We had that dip. And you can just sort of see, like, we had been tracking 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters in a row well above that rate and then suddenly dipped. Now, you could kind of go, okay, so here's 1, 2, 3, 4 times over the last 3 years that we've been down at that level. But keep in mind, last year we had the popcorn sale, popcorn wide distribution. We had candy. So I don't expect personally that we're dipping back there again. I think Q3, sorry guys, got a kind of a frog in my throat. I think Q3 was an anomaly. I don't particularly see us going back there, especially as popcorn has continued to grow, candy has continued to grow. Here, I'm just going to take a sip of coffee here. Give me a second. Sorry guys, a little tickle in my throat. Anyway, so, and you can see I put a trend line here, right? This is just a moving average over time of where we have been these last 3 years. And so what I want to show you, let's just go through this actually. How is the box office tracking? By the way, before I do this, Lilo and Stitch, the pre-sales, Fandango came out and gave an announcement. They said, first off, it's the biggest PG pre-sales of 2025. Now, I mean, we're only in April, so that didn't seem that huge to me, but here's what was bigger. They said it was, I think, Disney's best live action pre-sales since 2019. Now, you remember, what did we have in 2019? We had Lion King live action, which was a $1.6 billion movie. So for Lilo and Stitch to be the best live action pre-sales for Disney since Lion King, and we've had quite a few since then, that says something. And I continue to think this is going to be a really big hit. So if you go back and kind of think about how has AMC been trending over 3 years, that's plenty of history here for you to have some kind of trend on just an expectation of how much revenue might AMC have based on the domestic box office. And then you think about, I've shown you, we have, 5-6 weeks of box office so far. So we roughly know how, a few of the, Sinners we can track really well, right? Minecraft we can track really well. We know how those are doing. The Accountant, Amateur, some of these bigger movies, we've got a lot of box office in. Minecraft is, nearing its tail, all of that. So we know how we've started, and we can kind of guess roughly, obviously, on what all these other movies are going to do within the quarter. And how much legs we still have for Sinners and Thunderbolts and things like that. So here's the point. I think we're going to hit 2.9 billion this quarter. I'm giving you a range. I think we could be anywhere from 2.85 to 3. And gosh, if we hit 3 billion, that's only been done, I think, 4 times before. This would only be the 5th time ever in all of history that the domestic box office would be at 3 billion. So the fact we're even sniffing that, it would mean, some movies have to overperform. But what happens if Lilo and Stitch just blows it out of the water like Inside Out did last year? Or what happens if How to Train Your Dragon is huge? Or what happens if there's a few other movies like, I don't know, Mission Impossible or Final Destination Bloodlines or 28 Years Later. Some of these that maybe my forecast is too low. So I'm telling you, my forecast is hovering kind of at or just above 2.9 billion. Obviously, we can miss some to the downside, so that's why I'm giving you a bit of downside in this range. And we could be at to the upside and hit 3 billion. Well, let's just say the box office was 2.9 billion. So first off, I'm showing you the all-time record revenue in a quarter for AMC was 1.5 billion basically. You can see this 1.506. That is our all-time record. That was in 2019. Some of those huge Disney movies from 2019 certainly helped. It was probably the quarter with Endgame. Okay, so if our all-time record is just over 1.5 billion, then check this out. Remember, basically take this low from Q3, okay? Take the average or take what we just did in Q4. So I'm going to show you these 3 data points. If we were at last year's Q3 at that rate, I'm going to show you if we were at the average we've been at, the 3-year average. And I'm going to show you what if we hit what we just hit in Q4. Those are actuals. Those were in AMC's earnings from Q4. Well, here's the numbers we would hit. So you can see at a $2.9 billion box office at that low, even at kind of the worst we've been in 3 years, we're going to almost hit that all-time record. And keep in mind, our revenues per box office should go up over time. And here's why. Adam's talked about we've been expanding the merch. And I've shared with you how we have obviously the AMC in-house candy. Now that doesn't necessarily increase our revenues, that more increases our earnings, and that gets a little technical to talk about. We just have higher margin on that. It's more like we traded, instead of selling like, I don't know, Hershey's chocolate covered pretzels, we sell AMC's chocolate covered pretzels. So maybe forget the candy, but the point is we have way more merch, or we've been growing merch, and we obviously have popcorn in, let's call it 10,000 plus points of distribution. Thousands of doors of Walmart and Kroger and Publix, and it's in Amazon. And for me, there's a place called Fred Meyer. It's in a lot of stores. And so our revenue is higher. And then I've shown you in many other videos how our food and beverage revenue per person is higher as well. So generally over time, and you can see that in the trend line, you see how it's not super steep, but you can see this trend is up and to the right. So over time, for every $1 million at the US domestic box office, what AMC is doing is expanding its ability to create more revenue. So as the box office recovers, especially on that merch side and on the food and beverage, we make a lot more money. So even if we're at kind of the worst we've been for a long time, we are sniffing at our all-time record. We're just, less than, this is $38 million lower. As a percent, that is tiny. And then look at what happens if we just hit the 3-year average. We break the record. We crushed the record by $70 million. We would set an all-time AMC revenue record, never been done in AMC's 100-plus year history, right? So we're there. We got a shot at this quarter. And then Q4, if we just hit the rate that we were at our actuals in just Q4 that just finished the end of this last year at a $2.9 billion box office, which I believe strongly we're tracking towards, we would really, really set an all-time new record for AMC's revenue. So today, when Adam and team, I guess I was highlighting that, but when Adam and team have to talk about Q1 results and share that with us and kind of look back at that, I'm just continuing to say maybe we kind of close the chapter on the Survive era, because we may be in an all-time record quarter right now, and I just want my followers to know that. Speaking of lots of big things happening, there is lots of big movie news. So if you follow me on X, you would have seen this. You can kind of see, there I am, stock retail on X. So let me just share a few things that I had posted about, but don't so much focus on my post, just focus on the news. So you kind of know about the tariffs conversation. I'm going to touch on that just a little bit shortly after that. So here's the rumblings I take. If I just pull up above some of the headlines, there's something going on where the federal government and certainly the state of California as well are talking about supporting and bolstering and incentivizing the movie industry. Well, that's really, really great if you're in a movie stock. That's my opinion. I got trolled on X, and in particular by some accounts that some people actually think are pro AMC. I'm not into drama today. I'm not going there, but As I always say, keep watch because influencers want to influence your mind and your heart to get to your wallet. I had a whole video about that maybe in 2022. I'm not sure. Um, but I'm getting off topic. Here's the point. There are really, really big things going on. I mean, look at Gavin Newsom proposes $7.5 billion federal film incentive after Trump floats tariffs. Now, we could get into all kinds of debates about tax policies and what's right and all kinds of things. I'm not going to go there either, but I'm just letting you know there's big conversations happening. And if there start to be incentives and support, because some of the discussion, by the way, is also for the exhibitors, not just for studios and people, producing films, but also for the people showing films. In fact, Trump had talked about, and John Voight, right? Maybe some of you saw that, talked about incentives for film, movie exhibitors to kind of, like we've been having our AMC Go plan. What if there's suddenly, I don't know, tax rebates or grants, or I'm not sure quite what they're talking about, but if there's support for improving, theaters, that's going to be a really, really big deal for a theater stock like AMC. So I would not want to be a short and be watching the federal government say, hey, we might start to support this industry, right? And that's the thing with Trump. Like, you love him or hate him. I'm not going to go there either. But the guy is never about the surface level. You can really argue politics all you want. That's not what this channel is here for. But I would just encourage my followers to stop evaluating things on the surface level. So here's just an example. The other day I said, hey, and I'm being careful not to kind of make too much conjecture here. And I'm sort of saying, hey, this could be coincidence. It could be gamesmanship. It could be nothing. But here's the dots. This stuff happened. So Trump posts about putting criminals in Alcatraz. Maybe you guys all saw the post about reopening Alcatraz. And by the way, the time at which he posted, you want some tinfoil, the time at which he posted, if you use the Roman numerals, can decode to 5/7, which here we are on 5/7, it's AMC's earnings. Then he posted about the movie industry, but just 23 minutes later, I think it was. And at the time he posted that, actually, again, if you use the Roman numerals, decodes to "we will win." You guys know how much I say that. And so there's certainly some AMC tie there if you want to put on some really heavy tinfoil. And I just acknowledge that is complete tinfoil. I'm not suggesting that that's any kind of fact. No, I do want to we're going to have some discussions on these tariffs over time. We'll talk about it. I'm not going deep on that today. I'll just say a couple quick things. First of all, I'm seeing a lot of people confuse the word filming and production. All I have is a tweet to go on so far, just the same as you. So I don't know a lot of details, and we're going to have to see a lot more details come out. But he said production tariffs. Pardon me, I'm going to take another sip of coffee here. All right, so he said production tariffs. He didn't say filming tariffs. Of course, I am making my own just speculation here that was the focus. Let's find out. So I'm just gonna not spin myself around the axle until we get some details. People like to spin, and all of the Trump is a hero people come out, and all of the Trump is a devil people come out, and they all yell and scream at each other, and that's just not my way. So I tend to view that I believe he is signaling support for the movie industry, and I'm just gonna be happy for that. And I'm gonna just continue to see how we shake out. But here's the thing I want you, my followers, maybe not to miss. So he posts about Alcatraz, then he posts about the movie industry, then he posts, go back and look, you can find it. He posted a New York Post article, which was basically saying that the Trump group, the Trump administration is pretty unhappy with Ken Griffin and is kind of running something side by side with some things he's involved with, I think in LA even. So if you just say, all right, he's talking about putting criminals in jail, he's talking about the movie industry, and he's talking about Ken Griffin, and all these happened back to back to back. It was very quick in succession. I'll let you decide if those dots connect or not, but I kind of, you can kind of see that I think perhaps they do. You want some real deep tinfoil then to, actually, I guess I kind of, maybe I already covered all this. So there's a bit of a redundant tweet there, but just another view of that. You can screenshot that or go find me on X if you want to follow all this. So enough about that. But the point is, it's in the national dialogue, right? So there's discussion about government support for the movie industry. There's discussion about the domestic movie industry. and there's discussion about criminals and Ken Griffin. Again, you decide if those dots connect or not. I want to just hard pivot for 1 second, and then we'll close this out in a minute. Just because you guys know I track Bitcoin pretty heavily, so I was posting about this on X as well. And some people were kind of saying, "Hey, man, why did Bitcoin all of a sudden spike?" So here was the thing: if you looked, Besant was talking, and he specifically said, "Hey, he's going to be meeting with China." You guys have seen the real back and forth on Trump saying we're talking to China, and then China saying no, we're not. And this time, Besant said, "Yeah, we're talking to China," and China confirmed it. And effectively, some of the things Besant said were kind of moving the markets. Basically, the markets being happy that some things are getting worked out. And so you can kind of see the timing of when he was saying that was close to Bitcoin's spike. Like Bitcoin kind of spiked right after. And so had temporarily reclaimed. The one on the left is from today. The one on the right is from yesterday. Basically today it's like right around 97K again. If you look at the 1 year view, by the way, on Bitcoin, I guess there's a few things that I personally watch. There is a trend sometimes when Bitcoin really gets into its runs, it likes to kind of come back and sort of get anywhere near the 20-day EMA, the moving average. So that's something I track sometimes. That's not deep TA. I'm not even a TA guy. But maybe take a look at that. And if you look at the 1 year view and you look at Bitcoin's highs, you can kind of see there's like this shelf that happened for a while, and we're reapproaching that shelf. And it jumps real hard and real fast from this sort of like 97, 98K level. It's like the next thing is like 104K or something. I mean, I'm making that up. I'd have to go look again. But I guess I'm just saying keep track of that. I don't know whether that means we're going to repeat or not, but certainly from a sort of a technical view, it just looks like it could jump. What's more, I guess, just a quick Bitcoin news item. I don't know if you saw, New Hampshire was the first state to approve, put into law. It is now a law that there is basically going to be a strategic reserve of Bitcoin in New Hampshire at a state level. And I've told you guys for a long time, watch the states, watch the federal government. It's coming. You're going to see government entities purchasing Bitcoin. So New Hampshire's the first. Arizona technically had passed a law, but Governor Hobbs vetoed that. So that was kind of another thing I was posting about on X, I don't know, over the last week. You would have seen that. And basically, I suppose, again, I'm going to not get so political, but I did have a pretty strong point of view on that people who, I mean, to veto a democratically passed law of Bitcoin says a lot, and I believe signals somebody who is not interested in decentralization and liberty. And that is my point of view. I guess you can see a little bit more from me on X. Real quick on a personal note, so I had shared before, I'm going to breeze by this. I am Eric Thompson. I wrote Strong Like Wildflowers, in case you had missed that. That is published on Amazon. Love if any of you would continue to take a look at that. It is very hard for an indie author to break through, so please forgive me if, I don't know, once every so often, I'll try not to be obnoxious about it, but I'm going to remind you guys and just ask you if you want to support me, if you want to support an indie author, would absolutely love if you'd go take a look at that. It is in paperback and it is in Kindle edition. I even have a Kindle app on my iPhone that I read books on sometimes, so you don't have to have an actual Kindle. You can. It's just cheaper if you want to buy it, the digital version. Amazon takes quite the cut of the paperback because they have costs, to print that and ship it. And so whether you buy the digital or the paperback, I get about the same amount of money. So if you want to buy a cheaper version, it still supports this indie author. And another really big thing that supports that is if you do buy it, go and give it a rating. Ratings are anonymous. I've shared that reviews are not so anonymous. If you want to go that far and leave a review, that's not going to be anonymous, but ratings are anonymous and really, really help indie authors. You can see I've got the link to this in my bio here on YouTube. Would just love if you'd go check it out. I feel that it's a very inspirational story. A lot of people have told me that. It's not anything remotely about AMC. I had started writing this in 2019, long before I got into AMC, and so it's just unrelated, but something very special and personal to me. Go check that out. All right, enough about that. So you guys know we're in our multi-year industry turnaround. I don't know, that came out really weird. Let me say that again. We're in a multi-year industry turnaround. Real quick, I have been sharing about price to sales on X. Basically, I believe, demonstrates just how undervalued AMC is. Our price to sales is around 0.23. I have, I think, two videos maybe where I went pretty deep on price to sales. Go find any price to sales video from me. The numbers there will now be wrong, but the concepts will be right. We've had the strike since then and some other things that have just thrown us off. But the concepts are worth learning. And basically, someone who I view as a shill and just won't even interact with. Yep, you know who you are, I'm sure. You're probably listening. So I do think that that's what you are. I think you're a paid actor. I have always thought that about you. And you know that I know some DD on you. So just we can go as far with that as you want to go. But someone who I basically believe is a shill was trying to sort of, like when I shared, I don't know, a year and a half ago about taking a look at OBV. Take a look at that stock metric. It's something you'll see people post a lot about. That person also kind of tried to crap on that metric. Now I'm talking about price to sales, and they're sort of trying to troll that. And, like people will play I don't really see a lot of stock analysts talking about this. Well, here's the thing. Price to sales is, again, I've got a whole video on this. The answer's already out there. People know that. But just in a positive way for you, my listeners, especially if some of you are newer to me, price to sales is a nice metric to use. Let's say like you're a tech startup and you're not profitable yet. It's a way that you can value a company that hasn't yet reached profits, but you believe is going to. And you would find people saying that industry turnarounds is actually a very specific use case where you might use a price to sales metric. Have you had a company that, experienced some hard times, started to turn net negative, was not making profits, but you believe it's going to experience a turnaround, either a company turnaround or an industry turnaround? Then price to sales is a nice metric, because the problem with price to earnings is, first off, price to sales and price to earnings are a trailing 12-month metric. So they're going to look backwards at the last year. Now think about what's in the last year for AMC, the strike, right? So that's a pretty rough period, and we're not making profits yet. Now, you know that I believe Q2 is significant profits right now that we're in. But even with profits in Q2, if you were to use a price to earnings metric, you hear people talk about PE, you're going to have to wait until we have a full 12 months positive earnings. And even then, it's not a forward view. And so over time, I'll do a new video here on what I think our valuation ought to be. From time to time, I refresh that for you guys and where I think we're going. So that'll help. But you get the point that as AMC is rapidly growing, that a standard PE view is not so helpful, because you're looking backwards at a point in time where we are no longer, it's not our current reality. I don't use 1940s Europe to decide how to view 2020's US or something like that. That's not a good metaphor. I shouldn't make the metaphor here live on the spot, but I'll think of one. But you get the point that you just, sometimes it's not easy to use standard metrics if a business or an industry is radically turning around. And you will find that all over the internet. That's why I know this person was just sort of trolling. A 10-second search in Google or DuckDuckGo or Apple or whatever you use would have shown you, and now you, my listeners, will know, the price to sales is just a really nice metric to sort of talk about how to value a company that you believe is heading towards profits in an industry or a company turnaround. And so here's the point. Historically, the movie industry price to sales, which I've shown you in some of those old videos, is way, way, way higher than AMC's current price to sales. So if you believe AMC is moving towards profits, and this price to sales is significantly depressed under historic averages for the industry, and by the way, Cinemark's price to sales is 5x AMC. So AMC's stock would have to go up 5x. It would have to be at 5 times what we're at now to match Cinemark's price to sales. And IMAX is like maybe, I don't remember, 10 to 14 times higher. And then like Netflix is some radical like 20 to 30 times higher. I don't remember the numbers. We'll have to go back and look at that. But so the point is, AMC is, deep, deep value, in my opinion. So I'll talk more about that, but basically just wanted to acknowledge why sometimes, especially if you're on X, you'll see me talking about price to sales, and then really think through. Let's go back real quick to all right, if we're going to set an all-time record, and this is now our sales trajectory, then a couple things. One is, even if you stay at that 0.23 price to sales for AMC, if our sales goes up, then our price needs to go up just to keep that same price to sales. And then if that price to sales really is not I don't know what, it's not a fair, or it's basically a depressed value, it's undervalued, then if the sales go up, and you really ought to have the price to sales higher, you can't see me, but I'm like moving both of my hands higher, you're going to have this multiplier. AMC stock is going to have to go up by a lot to both recognize this new rate of sales and have a logical, reasonable, fair value price to sales. So what's really happened, just TLDR, bottom line on all of that, our price to sales is really based on a short and distort narrative of our past. Having gone through COVID, having gone through the strike, our price to sales, I'm obviously giving you opinion, and all I can ever give you is my opinion, but our price to sales is priced as though the strike and COVID are AMC's reality. But that's not the reality anymore. The reality is Bob Iger saying we have the strongest movie slate we've had in 6+ years. The reality is things like How to Train Your Dragon coming out and Mission Impossible. The reality is a quarter where we're about to hit 2.9 to maybe even 3 billion. The reality is AMC about to set all-time records in revenue. The reality is next year getting Star Wars and Avengers and all, Toy Story 5 and Shrek 5. We are in a different reality, and the price to sales of AMC, and in the future the price to earnings, does not match that reality. That is deep value. When you can find a stock that you know better than what the stock market is pricing a stock, you can find value. That's my point of view on that. And then my point of view is we will win. So let's go.